The Phoenix Suns went ahead and fired Mike Budenholzer, and damn, it what is it now? Monty Williams, Frank Vogel, Mike Budenholzer, and the weirdest thing is Coach Bud was once a heralded coach, and then I had some media members tell me that an agent told him that players think he's kind of a buffoon. Maybe he's just a bygone from a bygone era. And today I want to hear your thoughts down below. What do you think the Phoenix Suns need to do to fix their team? What would you do if you were James Jones? And it's an interesting situation because this is kind of the result of the new owner syndrome. So before we start, hit that like and subscribe button. And as I said, leave me your thoughts in the comment section on what you think. Now, let's just talk about this Phoenix Suns team that, man, they were bad. They were net rating, and their point differential was -3, 23rd in the league. Their team rank in points scored 18th, team rank in points allowed 22nd. They averaged 113 points per game, which is just below average in scoring output, and was 3 points less than the 116.6 points they gave up. And they were actually the 11th ranked field goal percentage team right there. They were a solid shooting team. They're able to hit shots, and they're actually the third most efficient three-point shooting team in the league. And same thing with the free throw. Like, they were a team that when they did shoot the ball, they were efficient. And again, fourth best true shooting. So when they shot the ball, they shot it efficiently. And if you look at this roster, it's no surprise. They had guys who were able to shoot the leather off the ball. And they were 10th in assists. Another thing, they were able to move the ball. And they were middle of the pack in turnovers. So it wasn't like they had like any sort of stat that stood out that they were particularly bad in. Now, it was the defense. As we mentioned already, they gave up the 8th most points. They allowed more than they scored. They had a below average defensive field goal percentage. They were the 9th worst in the league, 47.3%. They had bottom tier perimeter defense. They were the 3rd worst opponent 3-point percentage. And they had just a low steal rating, average rim protection, which I feel like improved with Nick Richards' arrival, but it was too little too late. And while they weren't a terrible rebounding team, they were the 11th worst in offensive rebounds, and that's just not creating second chance opportunities and allowing yourself to physically impose your will by grabbing boards. So they were out rebounded regularly, weak on the offensive glass, but they were actually a disciplined team in terms of fouling. So one of the things I found interesting was, for a team that was an elite shooting unit, they shouldn't have, struggled to put points up. And that's where, like, I find all of this really interesting, because I feel like this, of course, was a regression. Like, the Suns, since Bia took over, have slowly just gotten worse every single season. And it's kind of crazy to think about. When this team had championship aspirations, this team was expected, after losing in the second round with Durant in his first year, to make up for that and continue to strive and get to the next level. Did that ever happen? No, it didn't. And that's where I think the disconnect is. Like, how are we going to get there? If you're a Suns fan, I understand the concern you have. Like, this is a team that their field goal attempts were 26 in the league. They had a low shot volume. They did not shoot the basketball enough. And that led to them not at all putting themselves in a position to win games or to even be able to compete. Like, they had a deficit in 3-point attempts. They were below average in drawing fouls. There were flaws with this team. And one of the things I wanted to say is, like, when we look at the rotation that they had,
Durant, Booker, and Beal averaged about 69 points per game. They had great shooting depth in Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal, Nick Richards and Mason Plumlee, and then by the end of the year, Bol offered them some looks in the front court that gave, with the thought that like Ryan Dunn and O'Neal obviously weren't going to offset the liabilities that Booker and Beal gave you, but I think when you look at this team, that Bol 12.5 minutes, 7 points per game, 3 rebounds. Oso Iguodala, 4 points, 60%. Monte Morris, Colin Gillespie, Cody Martin, 4 points and 3.5 rebounds, 15 minutes. Like, that's the bottom of the bench, and wasn't great. Like, Royce O'Neal, Grayson Allen, cool. Ryan Dunn, those were cool. Like, 3 guys off the bench. Mason Plumlee, that's cool. But and like the center by committee's fine, but Tyus Jones, a backup point guard. Bradley Beal at this point, 17 points per game. He's a secondary scorer. He should just come in as a guy who provides depth off the bench. And that's what got me mad. So basically, one of the things that I wanted to say was, for how good this team or efficient they were shooting, they didn't take enough attempts. Like, they just shouldn't have been this bad. Even if like the roster had flaws, they shouldn't have been this bad. They should have at least been a play-in team. And because you had, obviously, yes, I know Kevin Durant defensively isn't what he used to be, but he's still true shooting 64%. He's an all-around forward who can be a matchup nightmare. So to me, I think having a secondary scorer and a primary scorer like Devin Booker, I mean, Bradley Beal, I get it. Like, it's terrible. But there just needs to be a coach who has some ingenuity here, or unless it's just bad vibes everywhere. And look, don't get me wrong, Tyus Jones is a steady floor general with an elite assist to turnover ratio and is a solid spot up shooter. He shot 58.5% true shooting. But man, I think at some point we're all in agreement that like this is a team that they've struggled to put together a unit that works, that wins games, and defense sucks. That's been a consistent theme here, that this team's defense sucks. And what baffles me is that they were just such a low shot volume, 4th lowest in field goal attempts. They just turned the ball over regularly. They struggled to rebound. And for a team that was as disciplined as they were, not fouling, getting as efficient as they were shooting the basketball, and I know that's also partially due to the fact that they didn't take that many shots, they shouldn't have been this bad. To me, maybe they should have made Kevin Young their head coach. You remember? Devin Booker vouched for him, said, "Oh, you should be our coach." And they didn't do that. They wanted a big name. And at this point, do you go ahead and you bring in like a wonder kid like James Borrego? Do you go ahead and you look for your JB Bickerstaff? Which in this case, do you bring in Taylor Jenkins? I think one of the biggest things is trying to figure out what you can do with this roster. Look, Kevin Durant's going to get traded. My hope is you try to find, there's 2 teams that are going to be interested in Kevin Durant. The first team is the desperate wannabe contenders. Who are those teams? I think the Grizzlies, if they could somehow add Kevin Durant to Ja Morant, Desmond Bane, and Jaren Jackson Jr., like with that's a pretty solid 4-man squad. The Miami Heat, if they can turn Andrew Wiggins and Terry Rozier into Kevin Durant, I think they would be pretty stoked. The Dallas Mavericks, it would have to be like PJ Washington and I think Daniel Gafford, but they would be pretty stoked if they were able to do a deal like that. Now, Minnesota, Julius Randle, Naz Reid, Mike Conley, they're another team. But those are all middle of the road offers. That, like, again, those might really be the best you'll get for Kevin Durant in terms of from a playoff team. You could, though, hope that maybe the Toronto Raptors, who have a bunch of players, decide they want to go all in and they trade you a combination of Jakob Poeltl and several players who are in that mold of being multi-positional players who fit their needs. Like, imagine if they could get, I wonder who is, obviously Jakob Poeltl would take up a third of the salary, but outside of that, would you look for an Emmanuel Quickley and maybe a couple young guys that they had drafted, like a Jamal Shed and a Jonathan Magbo? Or do you hope that the new owners of the Boston Celtics are so desperate to save luxury tax money that they straight up say, oh, here's Kristaps Porzingis and Drew Holiday, and you send us Kevin Durant and Vazi Micic. That way we have 2 expiring contracts and we can move off of Drew's contract and we don't have to pay Kristaps and we get to keep our championship window open. Just, these are theoretical, not saying that they're going to happen, but you'd have to assume. So there you go. Phoenix, gonna be interesting to see how that cards play out, because that one's definitely a shit sandwich.